Oh my gosh. Recording on video and on audio is such a new thing for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, my hair is still wet, whatever. I'm just gonna show up with you guys. So I told you guys I would, so that's how it's gonna be. I'm glad you're here though, because we're gonna be talking about something that has been really life-changing for me personally. And it's about being more present to create more joy in your life. I am super goal oriented. I have big dreams. I know you do too if you've been listening to these podcast episodes. And that's great. I think it's so amazing to be able to dream big and recognize that like you have so much potential within you. But I do think sometimes we can get lost in that journey and it can lead to a separation of our present selves and where we see ourselves going. And I think the whole point of connecting to your higher self is to bring that into your present space. Bring that headspace, bring that mindset into where you're at now, wherever you're at on your journey. So that is what we're going to be talking about today, is bringing more present to create more joy into your life. And we are going to be pulling from one of my favorite books, which is going to be The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I feel like I've talked about this in at least half of the episodes because it just made such a positive impact in my life, and I want you to take what I've learned about being more present so that you can feel more fulfilled in the day-to-day life. Because I was super goal-oriented, I still am, it can be really easy to get lost in the sauce, get so caught up on like what the next thing is that we struggle with feeling, confident, comfortable, and present in the now, in the present moment. And so I pulled some of my favorite things that have really impacted my life, and hopefully they can impact yours as well. And it's nothing super crazy. It's really just small things that I want you to start to implement into your life now. Starting with intention. Setting intention for your day. Setting intention for events. All of this is really powerful in you setting the tone for how you're going to show up in your present space. And so asking yourself in the morning, like, in a couple different ways. So one that is a really, really simple one is in the morning before your feet even hit the floor, you can place your hand over your heart, take a big breath in, and then say, today is going to be a great day. And then your feet hit the floor and you go. Because right now, maybe the way that your brain is working, as soon as that alarm goes off, you go into like fight or flight. You're like, I have to get up, I have to do this, here's my list of things I need to do, I'm already angry, I'm already rushed. And that approach to life is basically having you see that in everything that you're doing. Like, this is gonna be the worst Monday ever. And because you've said that, because you're thinking that, things are just gonna kind of come together that are not making you feel good about that day. And even if you have a tough day, it's really easy, and I'll get onto this later, it's really easy for us to like make it flow into the rest of our day, but really maybe it's just you had a rough morning. We all have rough mornings, that's okay, but that doesn't mean today can't still be a great day. Another way to set intentions is through journaling. So some of my clients, I have them do this the night before, setting like your big 3 intentions. Maybe you get overwhelmed with your to-do list for work or home or whatever. The night before, if you are feeling like your brain is racing or you got a lot of things on your mind, write down some of the things of like, these are my intentions for the day tomorrow. I want to make sure that I get outside. I want to make sure I finish this project and I connect with this person. Something very simple yet specific so that when you wake up, you've already set your intention for the day. You can do the same thing in the morning, but I do think journaling it out can really be a powerful way to do it. But even just the simple way that I mentioned of putting your hand over your heart and speaking that out can help break up the current thought pattern that might be keeping you stuck in this negative mindset around the day-to-day, around your current job that you hate, around some sort of situation that you're in right now that you want to get out of or you want to shift. It starts with intention. Intention behind events is really powerful too. Sometimes we think about like all these things on our to-do list. I can relate this back to like my most recently I had very busy weekends, going to bachelorette parties, doing stuff, and I was catching myself saying I have to go to New Orleans, I have to go here, I have to do this, when really it's like, oh, I have to record this podcast. And it's like all the things that you're doing, like these are things that you dreamed of. Old you would have dreamed, like would have loved to have been in this position to go on these amazing trips, to be able to connect with people through podcasts, through film, through everything. But instead, it's easy because, especially like as a society, it's so normalized to like see things in the negative. And so if you can start to shift your language towards saying like I get to do this instead of I have to, it makes a really big difference, and it starts to remind you like, no, these are actually good things. Even if it's something that kind of sucks that you don't love doing, like cleaning for me, you could say I get to, clean up the space before I have people come into it. Just a very small intention behind it. Same with just events, like if you're going to a family event, you're going to a party, if you want to instead set an intention behind it, like what do you actually want to seek from this? Are you looking to meet new people? Then that's your intention. Are you looking to connect deeper with some of your friends? Awesome. Are you looking to get out of your comfort zone and like try something new? That's great. But setting an intention behind it helps you really show up in the way that you want to. And you're calling that in because it's already within you, but calling it out through intention is going to really bring it out of you even more. Setting intentions, number one. The next thing is this was a hard one for me, to release always needing to classify a situation. What do I mean by that? We're very quick to, when something happens, being like, oh my gosh, this is such a bad day. I'm having the worst day. I'm having, just saying something is labeling it immediately as good or bad. And I've talked to you all about this with food before, and this kind of goes into life. So I'll take the food example and we're going to roll it into a life example, okay? So with food, seeing something and, let's say it's pizza and you've been taught that it's like bad. So then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm being so bad. I shouldn't eat this pizza. It's bad. But by you doing that, you're creating this association with it being a bad thing. And then what do? We feel guilty about it. And what does that lead to? It leads to us like emotional eating. We feel guilty. It leads to restrictive dieting, which then again leads to an emotional binge. And so we get trapped in that because we have associated a positive or negative thing towards it. So instead, if we can just see certain situations as this is neither positive nor negative, it's neutral. Like allow things to just be neutral in life. And that doesn't mean that like life is going to be boring and vanilla. It just means that it keeps us from having to constantly be on like high alert of like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. The world is ending. I need to feel really bad about this and I need to stop everything and freak out. Instead, you're like, you know what? This maybe is just a tough conversation I'm having. This person really might not be mad at me. I don't really need to stress about this. And by taking away the power behind it being a negative thing, it helps release your personal attachment to it, where maybe your ego is keeping you stuck because you're stuck in this negativity loop. So one thing that Eckhart Tolle talks about is negativity keeps you stuck and it blocks real change within. And I absolutely agree with that. And I don't mean that like you can't have days where you're feeling sad, you're angry, you're upset. But when you start to get into this pattern of always looking for the negative, always looking for like how things aren't working out for you, that is going to keep you stuck. And you will constantly be proving yourself right because that's just what we do naturally. And so instead, you can start to ask yourself, and this is a good question, in a loving way, like how can we drop that negativity? Like what can we kind of shift from it? Maybe like what can I learn from this space? Even if it's a tough lesson, like what is life still trying to teach me? When I started to do that, it started to help me see obstacles as opportunities, and not in this like annoying way to where you're not allowed to be angry or upset or sad ever, because you are, but like you can hold space for that and still grow from it as well. You're allowed to do both, and a lot of times that's what you're supposed to do in those situations when you are in a really low space. Like there's growth that needs to happen there, and so if you keep avoiding that growth, you will stay stuck. Speaking from personal experience. The next thing is getting stuck in the what ifs of life. So worrying about the hypothetical all of the time. So again, we're trying to be present. The goal of this episode is like, how can I be more present in my life? Well, if you are constantly worrying about the what if hypothetical scenarios in life, you are going to get very, very, very caught up in all of the things that haven't even happened. So think about it. I've talked to my clients about this before, like if you're constantly thinking, oh my gosh, what if this happens with my job? What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I can't do this? Like those things maybe are possibilities, but the thing is you're creating scenarios, hypothetical scenarios that have not even happened. So if they haven't happened, technically they're nothing, right? But they're taking up all this space in your brain. But they're still nothing, which means you are essentially worrying about nothing. So you're allowing so much of your brain space to be worrying about the what ifs, when really, if you can just take things head on day to day, it makes it a little bit easier. to show up for life. One thing that I love is like Jesus asked his disciples, can anxious thought add a single day to your life? And the answer is no. Anxiety is not helping you. And it is very normalized and I'm glad that people talk about it more, because I do think a lot of times people would try and just hide their anxiety, hide their depression, not talk about it. And I do think it needs to be talked about, but I think it's also important to call it out and then release it of like, okay, I'm getting stuck in this loop of worrying about the what ifs, getting stuck in this worry cycle. And you have to remind yourself, there's a couple different approaches you can take with this. You can remind yourself, hey, like these are scenarios that haven't even happened, so let's just table that. Let's like, I love the scenario one of my therapists told me. It was like, okay, like you're worrying about a lot of different problems, things in your head. So what if you just picture yourself like, you have a backpack and all those worries and things are in there, and maybe you just like take them out and put them away for later. It doesn't mean you're getting rid of them. You can come back to that problem if you need to, but you don't have to carry them with you every single day in and day out, because it's going to overwhelm you, it's going to consume you, and it's going to take away your joy, and we don't want that. That's going to be a really powerful thing. The other thing when it comes to what if scenarios, if you are getting really stuck, another exercise I have my clients do is actually walk through the what if scenario. So if there's this like really looming thought that's just always, a lot of times it's like, especially this time, day and age, is like, what if I lose my job? So there's fear behind like, oh my gosh, like maybe your coworkers just, got laid off, or there's just been a lot of that going on. And there's this fear of like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my job. I'm gonna lose my job. Every single time you get an email, you're triggered because you think you're gonna lose your job. Every time your boss wants to meet with you, that's what you're thinking about. And so your whole brain is consumed around, what if I lose my job? And the thing is, you worrying about it isn't going to bring you more job security, right? If anything, it might make it worse, because you're probably not gonna be able to show up and perform as well, because all you're doing is thinking about the loss of the job. So instead, walk through the scenario of like, okay, well, I haven't lost my job, but if I'm so worried about it, let's think through this. If I lost my job, maybe I wouldn't be able to pay my bills, or maybe I would need to sell my home, or maybe I would need to move out of this apartment and move somewhere more affordable, or move in with my parents for a bit, or whatever. Like walk through it and see what there could be. And even if it's not an ideal scenario, it's not the end of the world. Like you can get through it. So even if it happened, you can remind yourself, hey, like we can get through this. And the other thing is, we've gotten through harder days too. We've gotten through other things. And so reminding yourself that might take a little bit of the pressure off. That can be effective for some people. The other thing is just reminding yourself, you know what, like it's not helping me to worry about it. So I'm just going to release that, and like I'm going to step into it when it comes, because I've been without a job before and I got a job, so I can get another one. So that's just a small example about how breaking up with the what ifs can help just kind of free you from being attached to that anxious thought. Another one that can help you break up with some anxiety, which is the whole reason behind me reading this book, was to find gratitude in what you do have instead of jealousy or anger in what you don't. Buddha talks about how the root of suffering is found in our constant wanting and craving, of always like wanting something else, or you're seeing what someone else has and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, it's a lack mindset around, oh, I don't have that, I don't have this, and you're so focused on what you don't have. And I've gotten stuck there before, but it is so sad because it robs you of what you do have. And so gratitude brings you back to that space of just peace and presence, and recognizing, wow, I still have all of these amazing things. I mean, if you're listening to this episode, you're able to hear this, you're able to see this, your heart is beating right now, the air is coming into your lungs, and it's just like something so simple. Like start there and remind yourself. And the one thing I will say about gratitude is it's really powerful. Sometimes there's like a guilt gratitude thing where I know people go through really hard times, and sometimes they punish themselves for having thoughts of like, oh my gosh, but it could be so much worse. I was talking to one of my good friends, and she was like so sweet, going through a really hard time, and with, having had a really hard birth, she was just like, she needed to process that grief. She needed to work through those emotions, but instead she wasn't allowing it because she was so, she has a healthy baby now, but she kept telling herself like, oh, it could be so much worse. So she would just brush off her feelings and like do that. So there's this time and place for feeling gratitude, and I think that that's so important, but you're also allowed to still feel your feelings. So I don't want you to think that like being grateful for your life means you can never have sadness, or you can never feel like you're having to process through anger, sadness, or feelings of just not enoughness. Those are allowed, but if you can come back to gratitude, that is what helps pull you out of the hole of staying stuck in that, because you can get stuck in that space if all you're thinking about is what you don't have, if all you're thinking about is how far you are from your goals. And so instead, coming to a place of gratitude just gives you a stronger foundation in order to continue to grow in that space. So hopefully that helps you. I wanted to make sure that I didn't just bypass your emotions. Like, you're allowed to feel your feelings, but gratitude can really help you just come to a present space when you are feeling like you're comparing yourself to others, or you're focused on the future and all that you don't have. Coming back to gratitude is a really good practice. You can do this through writing gratitude in the morning, writing like 5 things you're grateful for every time you wake up. It could be that you're speaking them to yourself in prayer, as you're walking, anything. There's no wrong way to do gratitude, but it is important to feel it. It's important to feel it in your body and really feel like what that feels like to have that in your life. And it's such a beautiful space to be, because when you're in a place of gratitude, you're not able to feel that same level of anxiety and all these other emotions that are maybe fogging the opportunity for you to grow. The last one's a pretty big one, so I'm going to end with this. It is learning to change your narrative, learning to break up with your narrative. It is really easy for us to identify as something and then get really wrapped up in this identity. And if you're constantly identifying yourself to your pain or your suffering, you're never going to be free from it. I know that this can be really hard, because a lot of times we find connection and camaraderie in certain identities, but I still think we can like box ourselves in by just sticking to that one identity. So like, there's nothing wrong with like having a grief group and going through grief counseling. There's nothing wrong with, if you're going through something like depression or anxiety, there's nothing wrong with going and getting support. And like, you all know I'm all about therapy, but I do think it's important to not only see yourself in that light. And I'll tell you guys a little story about me and kind of how I had to break free from that. When it came to the body positivity space, I remember like this space, I mean, it's definitely been hijacked from what it started as, so definitely look into the history of body positivity and where it actually came from and the roots of it. But where it has grown into has become kind of toxic, and I don't talk about this a lot. I've stepped out of that space a lot because I was feeling like it was almost just as bad as diet culture, because it was still coming from such a space of judgment and making you feel bad about yourself and attaching yourself to a body. I know it sounds weird, but like when in the diet culture, it was like you had to attach yourself to like, you're not enough, you have to focus on hate in order to change, and you need to always be focusing on the flaws in your body. And then on the other end of the spectrum with the body positivity space is I felt like you weren't allowed to share any other kind of changes. You weren't allowed to desire any kind of change. I had clients who would come to me and they were like, I feel guilty for wanting to work out, for wanting to eat healthier, which, everyone's definition of healthy is different, but they felt bad for ordering a salad out because it was associated with diet culture. And so that's why I think it's so important for you guys to figure out your definition of confidence, your definition of, what makes when you feel your best, what's best for you. Everyone's healthy is definitely not a size, so I don't want you to focus on it, but I still feel like there was this like definition of what it needed to look like. And there was this weird, because I was showing up in the body positivity space and I would show my flaws. So I would show, how my body would fold and wrinkle, and I have, pimples, and my skin, has flaws, and, you're able to sit and have rolls over your stomach, just little things like that. It was like weird because you were getting praise for that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's so important for people to see every set type of body being represented. But I also think that as someone who is showing up in that space, you're getting praise for a certain thing, and then it keeps you kind of stuck in that narrative of like, this is who you need to be. And I've talked to some other people that I won't like give names or anything, but they kind of felt the same way, and so they stepped out of that space because they wanted to be more than just that. They didn't want to just be known and like, oh, you can only talk about this, or oh, if you're sharing that you're doing Pilates, that's wrong because you're making everyone else feel bad for not working out, or vice versa. Like, you're allowed to be both, but I think it's so, in society, you're constantly getting put into a box, and so then when you start to do anything outside of it, you're getting punished for that in some way. And so if you can kind of break up with the narrative of thinking that you have to be all or nothing, that you have to stick with whatever that is, it can help you become more free and more present in yourself, because your body is going to change. So it's important to get connected with yourself outside of your body, but it's also important for you to embrace your body. So like, see how there's two sides to that. The other thing when it comes to changing your narrative is, how do we speak about ourselves when we're talking about something that maybe is a narrative for us? So saying something like, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. So you're identifying yourself with those things. And that can be something to where it creates this association in your mind to where you can get really stuck in it. I've talked about the power of language, and I think it's really important to note that, like, instead of saying like, I suffer from depression, saying like, I battle depression, I fight depression. There's a very big difference there. I'm working through depression. See how that's more of like a positive, like you're moving through it, you're not stuck. I know it sounds like a very small and like nitpicky thing, but our brain hears that and takes it into our body. So it's just important to recognize. Another one that I know, this is like cold season. So a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, I'm getting sick. I'm so sick. Instead, if you can shift into saying like, I'm fighting a cold. You hear the difference? It's, again, super small, but it makes a really big difference in how we receive it mentally and physically in our own bodies. And so breaking up with associating ourselves with that narrative of like, I am this, because recognizing that you are so much more than your illness, you are so much more than that one narrative. And so breaking out of that is a really important reminder. Another thing that's important with this, changing the narrative, is actually picturing yourself outside of that space. And so what would it look like in the future, if you're able to grow around this grief that you're feeling right now? Like, what would that look like? Maybe right now you're so clouded because you're working through a lot of suffering and heartache. So start to see glimpses of it and then focus on that everywhere you can. Still meet yourself where you're at, but still continue to focus on what that can look like outside of that. Getting asked like, do something that makes me happy. Like, I was asked that when I was working through a lot of depression. And, at first I would get frustrated. I'd be like, I don't know what makes me happy. But then I started to think about what used to make me happy. And I do this with a lot of my clients who are working through depression. And it helps them see like, oh, well, even if I'm not sure if I'm going to feel the same way, I know that when I was a kid, I used to love to go play catch outside. I used to love to walk in the grass. I used to love to collect flowers, just like little things like that. And then when you start doing that, it helps you kind of tap into that space again and break up with the narrative thinking you have to stay stuck here. You're also allowed to find joy. Remember I said you're allowed to hold space for both joy and sadness? Same thing, like you're allowed to work through depression and like still allowed to be happy. I think sometimes we feel weird about that when we are even in therapy for something or working through something or dealing with a really big loss. It can be easy for us to think, oh no, I have to be sad. Like, this is my narrative now. I'm the one who lost so-and-so, so I need to be the sad person. And that's not the case. Like, does it mean that you have feelings of sadness? Absolutely, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with feeling that. But don't get so caught up in the narrative to think that you're not allowed to be more than that one thing that people tell you you are. Helping break up with this narrative is going to help you picture more of what that life looks like. A lot of times in the beginning of Body Confident Blueprint, y'all know this, like we have my course, Busy BCB, which is the course where you're learning all about this stuff. But if you want to dive even deeper, BCB Universe, BCBU, is where you're getting the community and support from me. So that's definitely something that if you want to work through this more, you should definitely get in your application now. I'll make sure to have the application link in here because we have another group coming this spring. But I will ask them on a discovery call, like, If you woke up tomorrow confident in your skin, you're at a weight that feels good, you are, really confident in your routine, you look in the mirror and you feel so good about yourself, you're doing stuff that makes you really happy, like what would that look like? And so I ask people like what confidence looks like to them, and they don't have an answer. And they don't even know what it would look like. They have been saying that they need to lose 20 pounds for so many years that they honestly don't even know what it looks like to not be craving weight loss, to not be trying to get smaller. They spent decades trying to get smaller, that was their identity, not the other end of it, not the side where they do feel confident in their skin, which is what they say they want. They're actually stuck in the narrative of like, no, this is me. I'm the person that's always on a diet, always losing weight. And it's probably because they were mirrored that as a kid. They saw that growing up, to where my mom, no matter what size she was, always felt like she wasn't enough. So like, that's how I need to feel now. And we're taking that narrative and rolling with it, but they never think of the other end of like, okay, well, regardless of what my weight is, what does that actually look like? I'm saying that I want to feel more confident in my skin, but I don't even know what that would look like. I don't know what I would do more of. I don't know how that would feel. And so if you can get more into that feeling, that's what's going to help you actually break up with that narrative. And so it's something that I help my clients with a lot, because we are coming off of this mindset of thinking that we're not enough, and that's just what we've been kind of seeing our whole lives. And so to be able to break up with that and actually see what that looks like, it helps you break up with thinking that the only solution in your life is to get smaller. That's my biggest goal, is help people see that that's not your solution to confidence. It's really about stepping into your confidence in a way outside of that goal that you thought that you had to do. And so it comes to getting more present in your body, embracing where you're at, and being able to slow down and find the power in the presence. So hopefully these things will help you as you kind of work through your thoughts. Don't feel like you have to do all of this at once. I would really start with just setting more intentions with your day, and then focusing on gratitude, and then kind of grow from there. Become more aware of how we're thinking, the anxious thoughts that come up, any kind of narratives you're running with, and then from there we can kind of work through them. That's something I help my clients do a little bit more intentionally. It's something I would love to do with you more one-on-one. I do confidence breakthrough sessions. If you want to know how to work with me, I do have that on my Instagram as a post, so you can check that out. But I appreciate you guys listening and being in this space and just being open to learning more about this as well as about yourself. I will see you guys next time.